Hi there, today we're going to be grading the roster moves that were made after Split 1, mainly because in the previous video you guys were able to reach the like goal, and as promised, here we are. So we're going to start things off with Loud. They brought in Pencada, who had some ups and downs at the start of Split 2, but he was able to start balling out towards the end, showing that he was one of, if not the best Brazilian player that didn't play in Split 1. Even though the player pickup was good, the fit wasn't the best. Many people, myself included, thought Pencada would be a great pickup and just have Tui's move to Duelist since he has a history of playing that role in Tier 2. Turns out, the man had a taste of being a controller and never wanted to look back, which is a fair enough take to have. I remember when he was playing against Evil Geniuses and EDG, the man was a fiend in the clutch. He won so many 1v2s and 1v1s that it was just suffocating if you were rooting against him. And if the man doesn't want to play Duelist, you don't have to force a player to do something that they don't want to do or most comfortable doing, because it turns out you won't get their best performance. At least that's what history has taught us. I just can't help but feel that this Ospos post that he made towards VCT players who were duelists does not give up on that dream of being a duelist. I felt like it was either directed at Tui's or maybe even Wu to just keep going even through the ups and downs. You can be a great duelist, just really inspirational stuff. Just basically telling the world that you can be the next great duelist. You're next. It was just pretty cool, Sorry for the Ospos glaze. But all this kind of led to the team to have roster issues. We saw Sadak, the IGL, play as the duelist. That's crazy to me, and because of that, their season kind of tumbled a little bit, unfortunately, because they had some visa issues that kind of held them back. Same thing with Sentinels during Split 1. So I think it's fair to give them a C- for this roster move. Even though the player pick was great, it was just the fit was horrible. I also want to mention Wolves. In hindsight, I kind of wanted to give them a C, but I gave them a B because, the TMV buff, the Thinking Man's Valorant buff. And if someone from Wolves just happens to be watching this video and you're looking for someone to sponsor, Valorant's favorite Thinking Man is now Orgless, At least I think he is. Regardless, I'm sure he will love to react to Wolves gameplay, seeing how he is from England and he talks about their soccer team from time to time on stream. But regardless, Wolves still kind of improved over the season with their changes. They were only one of 3 Chinese teams to beat Edward Gaming. That's quite an impressive feat in my opinion. So next we're going to talk about DRX, who are kind of in the opposite position, where a crazy gamble happened, basically flashback for Stacks. And if you didn't know, Stacks truly wasn't really feeling the IGL role. It was kind of like fitting a square peg in a circle hole. If the fit isn't right, no need to force it. However, this gamble paid off well for them. They were able to make it to champs, and not only make it to champs, but were the only Pacific team to make it to playoffs as well. So, I mean, giving them anything but an A would just be disrespectful, They also beat PaperX in this process too after this change, something that they couldn't do before, so it just makes sense to give the RX an A. Here we have Heretics. I think we have to give them an A+. They just had a roller coaster of a season when it came to the roster moves that they made. Some of it was planned, other parts of it was just unfortunate events with certain players schooling, pressure, blase blah. Substitutes had to come in and out, but when they were able to get everything clicking, they just looked dangerous. And to just navigate through all of that and still come out on top is just quite impressive. A+. For Bili Billi, I just want to point out how Flexin is truly the definition of a journeyman, bro. He's played for a total of 3 Tier 1 Chinese teams this year, and he's been pretty impressive on each team. I would say that his time on Bili Billi has been his least impressive performance, but it could just be the team's philosophy to how they play controllers, especially double controllers. From time to time, you can't expect both controllers to be top fragging all the time, Even Bianc was on this team. He basically got replaced for Flexin. Bianc also struggled as a controller on this team, so Flexin's at times diminished performance could just be because of the team's philosophy. Regardless, Bili Billi were able to make it to champs. This was their first international tournament for this year, for the year 2024. So we gotta at least give them some credit for that. So I'm gonna give them a B-. And here for RRQ, they picked up Mania, which record-wise is kind of hard to judge them because in Split 1 they didn't make it to playoffs. In Split 2 they did, so you would think they increased. And plus Mania was the 3rd best Neon in Pacific, at least stats-wise. So I'm gonna give them a B- because at least they still improved. And Mania, it just seemed like a no-duh pickup. You could tell there was a little bit of role issues because the roles that Mania played for PaperX kind of overlap with already established players on RRQ. but they were able to make it work and still improve in the process, which is a similar story for T1. I think it's quite obvious that Stax is a better player than Carpe. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that statement out. And also, even the games that T1 lost, it was not because of Stax, right? Maybe he had one bad map as Breach, but outside of that, the man was never the worst performer and went positive most of the time and had a lot of assists as an initiator, which is something that you typically would like to see from this role. So good job, T1. Maybe they can get the old Vision Strikers band back together in the process. And while we're in Pacific, we got to talk about Talon's massive gamble in getting Primi. I feel like this definitely is an A. They picked them up just so they can make it to champs. Of course, it would have been nice for them to win a game or two in champs, but I had a feeling that they weren't going to. It was just something in my gut that I just didn't see happening. And by the way, where are my 1%ers at? Let me know if you were able to get 1 or 2% on your pick'ems down below in the comments. But regardless, Primi was a fantastic pickup. I think there were like certain reports or comments that I saw online talking about how Primi was a good reason why Talon won Abyss. Something to do with the fact that he was playing a lot of rank matches on this map and he was able to give the team good callouts and whatnot, which kind of ultimately led them to like beating Team Secret and getting that champion's berth. And speaking of Team Secret, I'm giving them a B. Overall, they did get better. You know, they were able to beat a T1 team that had stacks as well as Gen G. That's nothing to sleep on. They just got unlucky since they went against the Primi Masterclass gamble from Talon. Better luck next year. I'm sure you guys will at least get an international berth if they keep up with this momentum, but you still gotta work hard for it though. Lastly, we have Bleed. My goodness, what can we say about this organization? On the bright side, when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to look but up, which is why I'm giving Bleed an F. Before they decided to bench Ye, they were one of the worst teams in Pacific. And somehow they went from being one of the worst teams in Pacific to just being one of the worst teams in VCT overall. To be fair, they had really close games against Gen G and T1, but they still lost every single one of them. Every single game. Global Esports included. Sorry for the stray. So for Fnatic, we're going to give them an A for a number of reasons. One, they respected their players' mental health condition. You know, they didn't force or put a lot of pressure for them to keep playing. We already seen how esports can really damage a lot of people's mental. And props to Fnatic for realizing that and not making a situation possibly worse. That's great. 2, oh my goodness, Hero was a great pick. Like, if you're looking for someone to replace Leo, it's going to be almost impossible. Because chances are they're already picked up by a team. Leo was considered one of the best, if not the best, initiator of last year. And this year he was making a case for himself again. So Hero stepped up big, but I think the team as a whole kind of elevated their play because they realized, oh, Leo isn't here. And we can't really put all this pressure on a rookie, even though Hero did have his moments. Here we're going to talk about NAVI. They're going to be the only team that I talk about when it comes to coaching just because of how crazy the situation was. I feel like it was truly a definition of an overreaction. I know some people will give NAVI an F. I'm going to give them a D. There's a couple of things why kicking your coach towards the end of the season is a bad idea. Like the brains of your team, you don't want to do that without having a solid backup plan, for one. And for two, like I mentioned earlier, this was an overreaction, you know? NAVI didn't fail to make it to Masters Madrid or Shanghai because they were bad. They failed to make it out because the format was dog water, right? NAVI played Team Heretics twice. And I think it's safe to say that Heretics was EMEA's best team. So it's just really unfortunate that NAVI went against EMEA's best team. Shoot, you can even make the case that Heretics had the second best season out of all teams this year. So it was just unlucky for NAVI, and they should have never really kicked their coach. Because at the end of the day, they looked worse. They went on a massive losing streak. I'm pretty sure if they never did that, they could have been at champs. Now for Gentlemates, they didn't really get better or worse, mainly because before they made this change, there were blowouts. And after they made this change, there were still blowouts. So Gentlemates just kind of like stayed the same, which is why I'm giving them a C-, because at least they didn't get drastically worse. And to the surprise of no one, we're giving Edward Gaming an A+. They won champs, guys. They won champs after making one of the riskiest roster moves I can think of, you know? Like we said, we've seen a lot of examples of when you cut the brain of your team off, that team does worse. And they did for their first 2 games. However, they were able to bounce back amazingly. And what's even crazier is that nobody, the player, out of all people became the IGL, Mr. Risk Taker, but they were able to make this work. as well as having great insight and plan to keep Haldong on the team within the coaching staff. That was kind of smart, you know? I kind of mentioned this in my EDG video. A lot of work was poured into that video. But yeah, EDG definitely deserves this A+ for their roster change. Here we have Nova Esports. It's kind of tricky to really gauge them because yes, they got slightly better, but they're doing the whole like rotating roster tomfoolery, right? I know Heretics look good this year, but they were rotating their roster out of necessity, not because they chose to. Nova Esports is choosing to do this like 6-man rotation tomfoolery, which just doesn't work. I hope in the long run that they just solidify a starting 5, but regardless, they get a C+ for slightly improving. Next we have JD Gaming. I guess I will give them a C+. Like before this roster change, they would just lose close games. Then after it, they started to win those close games, right? So overall, they kind of got a little bit more competitive, but I don't want to like give all the credit to the player, mainly because they made a coaching staff change. And I really don't want to focus on the coaching changes just because this video will be so much longer than it already is. But after seeing slight improvement, guess what JD Gaming does after the season is over? They let go of the coach that helped them improve. It's almost like they just don't learn anything at all. Maybe they proved me wrong in the offseason because they have the talent to be great, only time will tell. However, for Tyloo, I'm giving them a C. They kind of just stayed the same because like during split 1, they would beat a team that people thought was better than them and then beat a team that was a little bit less impressive. The same thing happened in split 2, so they kind of stayed the same in my opinion, so I feel like a C is justified. Next we have NRG, and man, let me tell you guys, it was difficult to grade NRG for a number of reasons. First, I'm kind of biased, right? I was really rooting for them to make it to champs after picking up Psalms and Finesse. But then I gotta look at like their performance, like their results, right? Like for 1 second, I would be like, oh, this is a B. They get a B. And then for another second, I'm like, oh, no. They really are a D. They should get a D-. So I was just bouncing between D and B. But I have to stay consistent. I'm giving NRG a D+, you know? And the reason why it's so tough that even though their record with the new team is worse, the old team kind of had it easy, bro. They were just farming Brazilian players. Like, and they still kind of struggled against Loud. They struggled against a Loud team where Tui's was on record for saying that he didn't touch a mouse. He didn't touch a mouse for 2 weeks, and they almost lost the map to that team. And if we fast forward to split 2, NRG did kind of look a little bit rocky at the start, but towards the end, you can see that they were clicking pretty well. If only if they had more time. I think NRG could have made it to champs, but they just didn't. And you have to remember, this version of NRG that had Psalm and FNS, they had to go against some heavy hitters in the Americas. Like their Sentinels match was close. They beat Crew, which was good. G2 slapped them silly. It's G2 at the end of the day. They were able to beat Edward Gaming the first time they met in champs. However, what really broke the camel's back for me, why I decided to give them a D+, was the way they lost to Cloud9, bro. They had a 12-5 lead and they could have made it to America's playoffs. And then from there, I think they had a legit path to champs if they got to 3rd place. So I think D+ is fair despite them looking like a better team, even though their performance and results doesn't say so. For Crew, I guess I'll give Crew an A-, mainly because they started off the season red hot because one of their players had an injury on their hands. The team was like, yeah, let's screw this great chemistry and vibes that we created and bring Klaus back as IGL, and then things went south. Overall, Crew had a formula that was winning. They went away from that formula and they started to lose, and they came back to the formula, and guess what? They started winning again. So congratulations to Crew for doing what was working all along. A round of applause for this team. And for MIBR, they kind of had like a rough split too, mainly because the players that they actually wanted on the team were having visa issues. So they brought in Paint and Shazam, which was kind of cool to see, but at the same time, it was always going to be an uphill battle playing with a team that I'm pretty sure they don't all speak the same language while going against Leviathan. So, and overall, they just kind of went backwards, you know. At the beginning of the season, they were able to upset some people and surprise teams. But during split 2, they were only able to get 1 win. I feel like giving them a D is pretty fair. And lastly, I'm giving Furia a C+. They're doing a good job at picking good players to be on their team. They're just not like getting as many wins as they should. But I'm sure they're going to change that in the offseason. as long as they just keep this momentum going, as long as those players continue to work hard and they just grind. And if they do that, I'm sure that Furia won't be that much of a laughing stock as they were this season. Thanks for watching this video. Let's say if this one gets 300 likes, I'll do another one creating off-season roster moves, or do a video like where should these players go, or the best fit for these players. But regardless, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll be yapping in the next one.